Карта даже нигде нету что-то. Мертвый, ожидаем. А, забудь.
Somehow it's always, you know, yeah, it's kind of flat. And beginning.
Issues that are, of course, tied together as people in the state lose jobs, lose their wages. And so their hope is to see people not only act to make resources available to individuals and families in need, but to act to make sure that they can live and be in safe housing as we head into this dangerous period and states across the country struggle to control this pandemic. I spoke to the program manager of this site, AJ Scipio, this morning, and I want you to take a listen to what she told me.
I think it's already tough, and it was tough looking forward to the holidays, and now with another freeze in place, it's really difficult. And I think a lot of people are afraid. I think a lot of people are in a position where they just don't know what to think. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn. We have a lot of people who have never accessed a food pantry, a food bank ever before in their lives. I've gotten reports from some of my staff members of people who have actually been in the lines out here having panic attacks because they are so afraid of what the process is going to be like.
The program managers and the volunteers here all echoed exactly what AJ just said here, that a lot of the people that are starting to show up in their cars in these lines are first timers. They have never before needed to access a food pantry before, which I think tells you a lot about the crisis that we're in at the moment. They also say, you know, every day that goes by that we still do not have a federal level aid package available to people losing work and struggling to support their families, these lines get longer and the resources available to these sites get more and more strained. Back to you, Allison.
Oh, Antonia, it is such a tough situation there in Oregon. Thank you so much for just sharing a little bit of what folks are going through there. Appreciate it.
Каждый, кто когда-либо искал работу, рассылал резюме или смотрел вакансии, так или иначе натыкался на удаленную работу. Ну, точно слышал о такой. Тем более сейчас. Многие потеряли работу, просели в доходах и нужен выход. Я как раз занимаюсь трудоустройством специалистов на удаленку, а показываю мир удаленной работы и обучаю тому, как зарабатывать из дома приличные деньги. Приличные — это сколько? Это московская зарплата, сидя дома. Следует отметить, что заработок более 100 тысяч рублей в месяц на удаленке – абсолютно нормальное явление. А самое главное – выбрать востребованную твердую профессию без спама или участия в сомнительных проектах или системах.
Hi, I'm Gareth, and in this video we're going to be thinking about how to write better harmony. Now, what I've got on the board here is a piece of harmony that in many ways is kind of textbook stuff. It's perfectly safe harmony, the chords all work. When you're looking at the individual parts, they all kind of flow along quite nicely. There's nothing particularly wrong with it technically. Actually, when you're listening to it, it's just a little bit boring, really. So it sounds like this. So the harmony is perfectly sound. But it's the sort of thing that people do, and then they say, but it doesn't sound very interesting. What can I do to make it more interesting? That's what we're going to do during this time together. Okay, now two things immediately strike me that make that less exciting, less interesting than it could be. One is everybody's moving in the same rhythm all the time. All four parts, exactly the same rhythm. So we've got no rhythmic independence between those four parts. So that's something that would not be too difficult to fix, just to get moments where there's a little bit of rhythmic independence going on in one or more of the parts. The other thing is, if you analyse what's going on in the harmony, it's a little bit basic. Yeah, it's all right. We're in B minor, it starts on chord 1, it goes up to a first inversion. Well, actually that's quite a good thing to do, to go to 1B there. Then it goes to chord 5, then we've got 1 again, then we've got 1 again, then we've got 5 again. So lots of 1s and 5s, aren't there? Then we go 1 again, and then 5 again, and then we go 1 again, and then 1 again. And then we go 4, 5, 1. Well, is there anything wrong with that particularly? Well, no. We're using our basic chords of the key, chords 1, 4 and 5. They're our primary chords. And the whole harmony is made up of those three chords. So that's okay, but it's going to make it sound a bit boring because we could do with maybe a little bit more chord variety than that somewhere. Part of the chord variety is also about the fact that we've got so many chords in root position. We've only got one first inversion chord that's crept in at the beginning there. Otherwise, everything is in root position, basically going through 1, 5 and just one example of a chord 4 near the end. So no wonder it feels a bit staid, a bit stuck. So without radically changing it, what could we do to make this sound a bit more interesting? And if you're into engaging with this task and you've done a bit of harmony, you may want to pause at this moment and have a go at doing this yourself and then come back and compare it with what I'm going to work through now. Or if you think I just want to
Можно так делать даже. 6-2.
stick with this, that's absolutely fine. Okay, now, is anything fundamentally wrong with the harmony of the first bar? I don't think there is really. So I'm not going to suggest anything too radically different because we've got our initial establishment of the key using chord 1 and we have a progression to chord 5 by the end of the bar and we've used a first inversion chord. So in fact, there are many strengths in the first bar for the reasons I've just outlined. There is a little trick we can play in the bass though that would just spruce this up. You can see that the B moves to a D, so what's to stop me putting in a passing note onto the D? And if I'm going to put a passing note between B and D, which obviously I can do because that's a third and you just need to slip in the note in between, and then that gives you that passing note between two notes that belong to a chord. Well, I could do the same thing here, couldn't I? Because this could then run up to my F sharp. So harmony note, passing note, harmony note, passing note. Suddenly, it just makes the bass line more interesting. Instead of, I've now got, and that gives us a bit of rhythmic independence as well. So the original first bar, in many ways, is perhaps the strongest bar on the whole piece. But stick a few quavers in the bass, sounding rather more interesting, isn't it? Okay, well, if we're going to do that, that seems fair enough. Maybe the next chord is also all right. You know, that's going to take us back to chord 1 again, which is fine. Now, because I've had 1 there, and I've already had 1 there, and I've had 1 there, I wonder if there's an alternative here. This is really a kind of midway phrase point, isn't it? I suppose just to make that clear, we could indicate that, couldn't we? Just to give us an idea that we've got 2 phrases there. Okay, now then, if we've got an imperfect cadence there, finishing on chord 5, well, that could be 1-5, but what are your other options? It could be 2-5, it could be 4-5. Well, I wonder if maybe just by changing that chord, we could get a chord 4 in there, because so far we've got this chord 4, but we haven't got any other 4s. So, you know, if we're not trying to be too adventurous with the harmony, but we've got an option to put another chord 4 in, we might as well, mightn't we? And then maybe we need to sit down on chord 5 here because it's this imperfect cadence we were talking about. There's a little opportunity here now, because we've got E in the tenor, to slip in a passing note there. So do you see, between the E and the C sharp, I can just have that little passing through D. So the first 2 bars, what have I done? Put some passing notes in the bass, put a passing note in the tenor, change one of the chords. Does it sound better? Let's see. Here's the original. You see the problem with that you're going 1-1-5, 1-1-5. That's why I'm trying to break that cycle a bit by using a 4. Listen to the use of 4 and the passing notes. Certainly sounds better, doesn't it? And there's lots more you could do to this. For example, if you really want to get into this, we could do another little sort of interesting thing here by inserting a suspension. So what would that mean? If I did this in the alto part, that's called a 4-3 suspension because the B is the 4th above the bass F sharp, the A sharp is the 3rd above the bass F sharp, and it's a suspension because it's prepared, sounded, resolved. Prepared, sounded, resolved. Prepared because it belongs to this B minor chord here. Sounded because it clashes with this chord 5, but resolved onto a note that belongs to the chord 5. P and S have to be the same note. S to R have to move by step, usually downwards, so it completely qualifies. So, what have we done? We've added some passing notes. We've changed that chord 1 to chord 4. Now I've added a suspension in the alto part. What does that sound like? Well, it's starting to sound a bit more interesting, isn't it? Okay, now if we go on to the next bar for a moment, well, 151 again, you know, and we're still maybe thinking we've only got one of these first inversion chords, so maybe we can have something else there. Well, there's a little trick going on here we might just capture. Without changing these chords, when you've got a melody that's going 1, 2, 3 in the key, which is what it's doing, B is the first degree, C sharp's the second, D is the third, this is an opportunity for something called a passing 6/4. What's a passing 6/4? Many people will know about this. It's when you go 1, 5C, 1B, or the other way around, 1B, 5C, 1. So I can go 1, 5C, 1B, or the other way around, 1B, 5C, 1. And then the other place I can do it is between 4 and 4B using 1C. So 4, 1C, 4B, or 4B, 1C, 4. Those are the two common uses of a passing 6/4. And it's one of the places where you can use a second inversion chord if you want to. Doesn't have to happen this way, but quite often if the melody is going 1, 2, 3, the bass can go 3, 2, 1, so the same thing in the opposite direction. Or if the melody was going 3, 2, 1, you could do it the other way around. Well, let's try this passing 6/4 thing, shall we? So if I start on D here, and then I come down the scale, you can see what I'm doing. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. And then if we do this as a passing 6/4, well, we would do something like this. It's just involving a slight reorganization of middle parts for a kind of optimum result, but it's still essentially the same chords. But instead of going too adventurous with the harmony, but we've got an option to put another chord 4 in, we might as well, mightn't we? And then maybe we need to sit down on chord 5 here because it's this imperfect cadence we were talking about. There's a little opportunity here now, because we've got E in the tenor, to slip in a passing note there. So do you see, between the E and the C sharp, I can just have that little passing through D. So the first 2 bars, what have I done? Put some passing notes in the bass, put a passing note in the tenor, change one of the chords. Does it sound better? Let's see. Here's the original. You see the problem with that you're going 1, 1, 5, 1, 1, 5. That's why I'm trying to break that cycle a bit by using a 4. Listen to the use of 4 and the passing notes. Certainly sounds better, doesn't it? And there's lots more you could do to this. For example, if you really want to get into this, we could do another little sort of interesting thing here by inserting a suspension. So what would that mean? If I did this in the alto part, that's called a 4/3 suspension, because the B is the 4th above the bass F sharp, the A sharp is the 3rd above the bass F sharp, and it's a suspension because it's prepared, sounded, resolved. Prepared, sounded, resolved. Prepared because it belongs to this B minor chord here, sounded because it clashes with this chord 5, but resolved onto a note that belongs to the chord 5. P and S have to be the same note. S to R have to move by step, usually downwards, so it completely qualifies. So What have we done? We've added some passing notes. We've changed that chord 1 to chord 4. Now I've added a suspension in the alto part. What does that sound like? Well, it's starting to sound a bit more interesting, isn't it? Okay, now if we go on to the next bar for a moment, well, 151 again, you know, and we're still maybe thinking we've only got one of these first inversion chords, so maybe we can have something else there. Well, there's a little trick going on here we might just capture. Without changing these chords, when you've got a melody that's going 1, 2, 3 in the key, which is what it's doing, B is the first degree, C sharp's the second, D is the third, this is an opportunity for something called a pass. People will know about this. 4. What's a passing 6/4? Many people will know about this. It's when you go 1, 5C, 1B, or the other way around. 1B, 5C, 1. So I can go 1, 5C, 1B, or the other way around. 1B, 5C, 1. And then the other place I can do it is between 4 and 4B using 1C. So 4, 1C, 4B, or 4B, 1C.
Знаете, можно я куда-нибудь пойду, вот кушетку поставлю куда-нибудь, рядом с батареей, и рядом без батареи где-нибудь фортепиано. Местечко как без батареи. Прямой автобус домой. Да. Нет, а что-то такого-то. Ну нет, понимаю. Вот теперь ты меня знаешь. Ну да. Люди и так к работе не относятся просто, да, я понимаю уже. Ну хорошо, как это называется зарабатывать деньги, правильно? Мaratovich. А делать ты что будешь? Ладно, дадут тебе такое, что ты делать? Отлынивать. Это нормальный мужик, он ты понимаешь. Это просто потому, что мужчина не может работать. Он отлынивает и бухает, и отдыхает. Он тебя понял уже, да. Тогда это уже, ну, как бы, да. Потому что надо реализовываться, не работать, а реализовываться. Потому, да. Ну, надо на себя работать, надо себя создавать самому, да. То есть, это многочленный путь. Он тебя понял. То есть я, блин, как я. Они пусть тут абстрактно движутся, а я супер сперма, я. Понимаешь, как, да. Меня не касается, да. Я не могу просто, это настолько тупо, что ты даже удивишься. Нет, даже не понял никогда. Я, может быть, и не прав, я согласен. Но я как бы, а зачем, если я не могу ими управлять, зачем? Я пробовал когда-то, было такое дело, то есть, в принципе, это не заканчивается, ну да, типа того. Нет, сказать что-то за себя я могу, как бы это имеет какой-то смысл тоже, когда как. Ну, понимаю. Вот, ну да. Ну нет, зачем обиды? А что ты будешь? Ну даже смотри, все такие, опа, и начинают тебя слушать, а толку-то какого? А ты все равно можешь делать внешнее только, да. То есть как бы, потому что человек изнутри живет как-то, какой-то своей тайной. Ты своей живешь, они не хуже тебя, они тоже живут, да. Понимают это. Ну это не в обиду сказано, а просто говорит, да. Любви, печаль, ненависть, да. Ну не надо, да, ну да, свои обиды у всех какие-то, свои какие-то, что-то там такое, нет, а как жить-то? Ну это зачем ты мужчина и зачем ты женщина? Как ты думаешь, зачем ты мужчина? Ну нет, да, то есть, что-то обосноваться, да. Дорогу себе растить, ну нет, я понял. Как бы да, понимаешь, да, и будешь неправ всегда, лохом будешь. Не убиваешь тебя, это нормально. Ну это знает, нормально. Вот в том-то и штучка, что нормально можно, да. Нет, не надо болеть, потому что это одно и то же. Потому что я это праздное состояние души, да. Нет, не надо.
4. Those are the two common uses of a passing 6/4. And it's one of the places where you can use a second inversion chord if you want to. Doesn't have to happen this way, but quite often if the melody is going 1, 2, 3, the bass can go 3, 2, 1, so the same thing in the opposite direction. Or if the melody was going 3, 2, 1, you could do it the other way around. Well, let's try this passing 6/4 thing, shall we? So if I start on D here, and then I come down the scale, you can see what I'm doing. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. And then if we do this as a passing 6/4, well, we would do something like this. It's just involving a slight reorganization of middle parts for a kind of optimum result, but it's still essentially the same chords. But instead of going 1, 5, 1, I've now gone 1B, 5C, 1. So you see, just by sprucing up the inversions a bit, we're going somewhere. So nothing wrong with the original. 1, 5, 1. Now I've got 1B, 5C, 1. Okay, so it's just making it a bit more interesting, isn't it? Having done that, well, I could go on to my next chord and we could go back to 1, or we could go back to 1B. The reason why I'm suggesting 1B is we've just had 1. So maybe we could hop back to the 1B. And on the same principle of what we've just been saying about the melodic movement between the top and the bottom and the passing 6/4, always look at this possibility. The top part's going D, B, the bottom part's going B, D. So swapping over is something that you can easily do. So we might end up just by putting a first inversion there. That could be quite a nice thing to do. Now you might be looking at this saying, well, I thought we were trying to make it more interesting, but isn't this alto part a bit boring? F sharp, F sharp, F sharp, F sharp, F sharp. Well, yes, it is a bit boring, but actually one of the marks of good harmony is that you often have stability in one of the parts. It's often the alto part, but it sometimes can be the tenor part, where when you're going from one chord to the next, if you've got a note that's common to the progression of chords, you try to sound it in the same part. It gives you a smoother transition between one chord and the next. So the altos won't thank you if you give them thousands of F sharps, but actually it's a sign of a bit of stability there. Now, the other thing you could do, having got this bass line, is, well, what about one of these passing notes in here? Look again. We could do that, couldn't we? And then we could stick with our chord 4. Well, why not? You know, there's nothing wrong with it, is there? So let's put that in. I'm going to just do something in the tenor here. I'm going to make that into a crotchet and have a passing note. Because whenever you've got this movement of a third melodically, you've always got the option to put a passing note in. It doesn't always work, but third, have a passing note. Because whenever you've got this movement of a third melodically, you've always got the option to put a passing note in. It doesn't always work, but often it does. And then we can have this. And I'm just thinking, rather than just have these 3 chords going, if we can get some movement, that would be quite nice. So already, yeah, so that would just take the rhythm somewhere. And then we could even do something a bit more nifty here. Now, have a look at this little trick. I'll complete the last chord, and you can sort of see where we're going. So we had 4-5-1. I've stuck with the 4-5-1. I'm trying to stick with, you know, as much of the original harmony as seems reasonable. You know, we're not over-exciting the choice of chords, we're just trying to make it work better. But just for having a passing note in the tenor there, taking me on to this chord 5, then what I've done is I've put a passing note in the tenor going the other way, on turn E, and that E turns this chord 5 into chord 5-7. So if you start with a 5 and then you make it 5-7, it strengthens the chord. So by the time I get to that E, it's strengthened that 5 to a 5-7. If you write a 5/7, you just have to be a little bit careful, because when you write a 5/7, when it resolves, the 7th should fall by a step, which it does. The 3rd should rise by a step, which it does. So that's lucky, isn't it? So the last 2 bars originally were this. And now we've got this. So what I've tried to demonstrate there is by keeping 3 parts exactly the same, and just by altering 1 part, we can make it actually transform a bit. Now you might want to do this little trick at the end and turn this D into a D sharp. Well, why would I want to do that if I'm in the key of B minor? Well, that's something called a TS de Picardy. It only works in this instance when you're in a minor key, but you decide instead of using the tonic chord, chord 1 at the end, you borrow chord 1 or the tonic chord from the tonic major key. We're in B minor, I'm borrowing that chord as chord 1 in B major, and it gives you this kind of brighter major finish. So I'm in a minor key here and I finish on a major chord. So how does all that come together? That's rather nice, isn't it? To have that brighter, more optimistic finish. Okay, so that's all good. You know, are there other things we could do? Absolutely. You could, for example, decide you're going to put a passing note in the bass here. And that's another instance where you end up with a chord 5, and by adding the passing note, it becomes 5/7. This time, rather interestingly, 5/7 in last inversion, a 5/7 D chord. Does the 7th fall by step? Yes, it does. Does the 3rd rise by step? Yes, it does. Well, that's absolutely fine, isn't it? Okay, have a listen to the original again. Okay, listen to our spruced up version. You could do much more with that. You could experiment with more interesting chords, for example. We could use chromatic chords. We could use chords within the key that are just a bit more exciting. What I'm trying to demonstrate here, though, is how would you take that? Say that was your first draft of something where you spent ages choosing chords that fit, writing parts that fit, avoiding breaking any rules of harmony like consecutive fifths, consecutive octaves, double major thirds, all that kind of stuff, where the voice leading all kind of works all right. How would you then take that and turn it into draft 2? And I'm suggesting here that you've got something that would make it a rather more interesting thing. Is there more you could do? Absolutely. I mean, you might decide that some of this stuff, the tenor part could do something like this in the 3rd bar. And it would get even more interesting, wouldn't it? You could use a diminished 7th chord here, for example. That would make it even more interesting, a bit of chromatic colour there with a diminished 7th, you know? So there are lots of possibilities there, aren't there? We could use a chord 6 at this point instead of that chord 1. So there are things we could do to take it even further. We could do something like have a secondary dominant into F sharp major at this point, by going 5/7, even more interesting, a bit of chromatic colour there with a diminished 7th, you know? So there are lots of possibilities there, aren't there? We could use a chord 6 at this point instead of that chord 1. So there are things we could do to take it even further. We could do something like have a secondary dominant into F sharp major at this point by going 5/7 to 1 in F sharp. So how about we did 5/7B with an E in the bass turn to E sharp, and then to F sharp major before finishing on a tierce de Picardy. So that would enrich the harmony yet further. So those are ideas for people who are comfortable writing harmony and were thinking, oh yeah, how could I actually choose a few chords that would give it an extra spice? But the main point here is there's a piece of basic harmony. This is how you might transform it so it becomes something that's much more effective. So I hope that gives you a few ideas as to how to go about this particular task.
suis littéralement sur le... Rien n'arrive à la cheville de ce film. Rangez les pop-corns, prenez votre bloc-notes et votre stylo, soyez attentifs. Le loup de Wall Street, The Social Network, le fondateur. Oubliez, vous en apprendrez bien plus avec la vérité cachée sur l'entrepreneuriat. Avec le film La vérité cachée sur l'entrepreneuriat, je prends de gros risques et je ne me fais pas que des amis, car je vous dévoile l'envers du décor du business en ligne. Parmi les choses passionnantes et contre-intuitives que vous allez découvrir, je vais entre autres anéantir tous les mythes que l'on vous a insidieusement fait avaler. Voici ici certains mensonges d'entrepreneuriat des plus courants. Créer une chaîne YouTube, mensonge. Lancer une chaîne de podcast, mensonge également. Utiliser le référencement organique quand on démarre. Mensonge. Utiliser à outrance la publicité payante, également mensonge. Créer des tunnels de vente, en veux-tu, en voilà, mensonge. Utiliser des chatbots pour communiquer avec son audience, mensonge. Et utiliser LinkedIn si vous faites du B2B. Devinez quoi? Mensonge. Et bien d'autres encore, aussi farfelus et ridicules les uns que les autres. Trop souvent, ils semblent a priori expliquer la réussite de certains entrepreneurs à succès. Mais en réalité, il n'en est rien. Et si vous les avez implémentés sans avoir de résultats massifs, aujourd'hui, vous êtes plus proche de la faillite qu'autre chose. Mais vous devez impérativement vous procurer ce que j'appelle à la 6e minute du film, l'antidote, pendant qu'il en est encore temps. Celui qui va vous permettre de passer de 0 à 5 000 euros par mois, qui est totalement différent de celui qui va vous permettre de générer vos premiers 25 000 euros par mois, et lui-même encore différent de celui que j'ai utilisé pour faire mon premier mois à 100 000 euros. Et puis, il y a celui que nous utilisons pour générer plusieurs millions d'euros par an. Maintenant, si vous souhaitez obtenir votre antidote et découvrir la vérité cachée sur l'entrepreneuriat, il ne vous reste plus qu'à cliquer sur le lien qui s'affiche à l'écran et visionner ce film qui est offert pour une durée limitée. Ne perdez pas votre temps avec d'autres films, conférences en ligne ou webinaires qui ne vous apprendront rien. Ce film a été créé spécialement pour bouleverser votre business et changer votre vie.
Dear fellow scholars, this is 2-minute papers with Károly Zsolnai Fehér. You are in for a real treat today, because today we are not going to simulate just plain regular fluids. No, we're going to simulate ferrofluids. These are fluids that have magnetic properties and respond to an external magnetic field, and you will see in a moment that they are able to even climb things. You see in the reference footage here that this also means if there is no magnetic field, we have a regular fluid simulation. Nothing too crazy here. In this real-world footage, we have a tray of ferrofluid up in the air and we have a magnet below it, so as the tray descends down and gets closer to the magnet, this happens. But the strength of the magnetic field is not the only factor that a simulation needs to take into account. Here's another real experiment that shows that the orientation of the magnet also makes a great deal of difference to the distortions of the fluid surface. And now, let's have a look at some simulations. This simulation reproduces the rotating magnet experiment that you've seen a second ago. It works great. What is even more, if we are in a simulation, we can finally do things that would either be expensive or impossible in the real life. So let's do exactly that. You see a steel sphere attracting the ferrofluid here, and now the strength of the magnet within is decreased, giving us the impression that we can bend this fluid to our will. How cool is that? In the simulation, we can also experiment with arbitrarily shaped magnets. And here's the legendary real experiment where with magnetism, we can make a ferrofluid climb up on this steel helix. Look at that! When I first seen this video and started reading the paper, I was just giggling like a little girl. So good! Just imagine how hard it is to do something where we have footage from the real world that keeps judging our simulation results, and we are only done when there's a near exact match, such as the one you see here. Huge congratulations to the authors. You see here how the simulation, the one you see here. Huge congratulations. Done when there's a near exact match, such as the one you see here. Huge congratulations to the authors. You see here how the simulation output depends on the number of iterations. More iterations means that we redo the calculations over and over again and get results closer to what would happen in real life at the cost of more computation time. However, as you see, we can get close to the real solution with even one iteration, which is remarkable. In my own fluid simulation experiments, when I tried to solve the pressure field, using 1 to 4 iterations gave me a result that's not only inaccurate, but singular, which blows up the simulation. Look at this. On this axis, you can see how the fluid disturbances get more pronounced as a response to a stronger magnetic field. And in this direction, you see how the effect of surface tension smooths out these shapes. What a visualization! The information density in this example is just out of this world, and it is still both informative and beautiful. If only I could tell you how many times I have to remake each of the figures in pursuit of this, I can only imagine how long it took to finish this one. Bravo! And if all that's not enough for you to fall out of your chair, get this. It is about Libo Huang, the first author of this paper. I became quite curious about his other works and have found exactly 0 of them. This was his first paper. My goodness. And of course, it takes a team to create such a work, so congratulations to all 3 authors. This is one heck of a paper. Check it out in the video description. Thanks for watching and for your generous support, and I'll see you next time.
Learning guitar? Wait, don't touch that skip button.
А что, это не так плохо?
Finding no relief during
100 в год. Ну, короче, не важно. Ну, а как ты подумай, сколько за да? При условии, что ты реально там учишься чему-то. Да? Нет. Учишь себя сам чему-то. А такого не бывает. Не получается так, да.
During the holiday, hospitalizations on Thanksgiving hit a record high for the 17th straight day, with more states turning to field hospitals. In Wisconsin, some medical centers are rolling out beds into lobbies and parking garages. By next week, nearly a quarter of all hospitals could face a staffing shortage.
A lot of people ask what they can do for us healthcare workers during this time, and I think that's the most important thing.
Я вообще никто, что ты на меня смотришь? Хочешь доказательства? Хочешь посмотреть, сколько у меня деньги на PayPal? Ноль там, ну ладно, я не буду показывать. Вчера посмотрел. Нет, я просто тебе говорю, что да. Ну да, то есть это, ну, я, к примеру, это единственный источник, ну как бы почти что. Все это, ну типа того, ну блин, что ты скажу, да при чем здесь не для денег, почему? Это намеренно для плана. Сейчас, сейчас. Ну это просто. Ну да. А, новый идут, знаешь? Сказал сам, что это такое? Что это почему-то говоришь? Что это такое вообще? Какие-то, блин, штуки эти, блин. Желтый красивый. Кто такой? Что-то такое. Незнакомая. Ой, у меня такая одежда. Незабвенная. Что такое? Здесь он видит дела.